Hi guys, this is just a very quick look at ledge climbing in Platformer Pro applied to a sprite. So we'll just quickly have a look at the sprite sheet, and if we go to the ledge climb animations, you'll see that the pivot on the animation is set to the ledge point. That's the main part of setting up a sprite for ledge climb. Once that's in place, we'll see we've got our character here, and we're going to add wall movement, and we're going to choose standard ledge climb. And before we look at the settings there, I'll just quickly note that up here, now that we have a wall movement added, we have some new options in the layer settings. So at the moment it's using all walls, which basically means every wall in the entire level will be considered for sliding, ledge climbing, etc. You can alternatively specify a specific layer, or alternatively a specific tag, and only walls within those layers or with that tag will be used by the wall movements. In this sample we're just going to use all walls. Now if we go to the ledge climb settings, we'll see there's three high level categories. The first is ledge detection. This determines how an edge is detected. One option is none. This is generally used when you're using tags for your ledge climbing. So it basically says whenever you hit a wall, the transform position of that wall is the edge. Another option is box, which is similar to 2D PC, in which the edges or the extents of a box collider are considered the edges of the ledge. The third option is circle cast, where basically when we think there's a ledge, we cast a circle in the direction of the ledge and find the very edge point. So this works with any kind of collider. The reason to use something like box as opposed to circle cast is primarily performance. Detecting the edges of a box is much simpler than performing circle casts and running calculations against it. It's also more stable. If you have all kinds of geometry with polygons, you may find things that are detected as ledges that you don't want to be. In this example we are going to use the box detection. I'll skip gap detection at the minute and we'll move to animation targeting. So for sprites we're just going to use sprite pivot, which basically means the pivot point of the sprite has been set as we looked at before, and there's nothing else we need to do except set this stand offset. So the stand offset technically is the distance between the pivot of your standing or idle sprite and the pivot of the last frame of your ledge climb. It can be calculated. Doing it at runtime is quite expensive, but I may add a option here. However, often even the calculated value doesn't quite look right. So in my case, the calculated value is, if I was to calculate it, I happen to know it, -1 and 0.6, but I found that it looks better if I slightly adjust this value. Finally, you've got some details about what we consider to be a ledge in terms of how far above the character's hand it is, how many colliders are required to be colliding with the ledge, and also how long the character needs to be reaching out towards a ledge before they can grab it. Just note, as with most things in Platformer Pro, you can hover over to get a description of what the settings for. Minimum reach time is primarily for 3D characters where you have an animation that shows you reaching for a ledge. It can look a bit weird if you go directly from from an airborne state to a grasp state. Grasp leeway can be calculated by pressing this default button. Basically it says take the middle of your character and add half the character's height and as the minimum and the whole character's height as the maximum. This is a rough sort of leeway for where the tops of your hands would be if you're reaching for a ledge. But you can tweak this if you find that you're grabbing ledges too easily or not easily enough. Finally, required colliders is basically how many side colliders need to be colliding with the ledge. 2 is generally okay, but having a look at the geometry on this level, you'll see that it's quite thin, these pipes, so I'm just going to set it to 1. So with those values in place, we can hit play and we're able to ledge climb. Now we'll notice that the edge of our box collider doesn't quite line up with the edge of the backing images. So you can address that by changing your sprite pivots. You can also use the ledge offset to slightly tweak that. So if we put in a very slight deviation here, we'll see it looks more realistic, and when I press up we climb the ledge. Notice we've got a ledge that's very small over here. We can still grab and climb that, but we end up basically inside the geometry. We have a look at this characters colliders, we'll see that they're actually inside the geometry here. And that's what gap detection is for. So if we go back to our character, back to gap detection, currently it's at none, which basically means whenever we find the edge of a box that meets our constraints down here, we consider it to be a ledge. This works better when you're using tags, because it's up to you as the designer to tag the ledges. When you're applying it to all geometry, you typically want to detect the gap. So there's one gap detection method implemented at the moment, which is the character's side colliders will be moved to the finished position and then cast forward, and will basically say, is there enough room for me to stand there? No other settings required. So we can still ledge climb over here, but now, because we don't have enough room to stand, we can't grab the ledge over there. If we were to take that pipe and move it out a bit, we can now grab the ledge because there's enough room for us to stand. So that's ledge colliders for sprites. Ledge climbing for sprites. Very rough.